Hey guys, it's Jade with Metabolic Effect here. We've been getting a ton of questions lately on the Metabolic Effect Facebook page, and I've been busy sort of doing other things in the self-development, self-help world, which is sort of my other expertise and my other business. And so I haven't got around to answering many of these questions. So I'm going to cover a couple of them, and maybe if this works out, these videos, I'll start doing these more. So one of the questions we had recently was about the idea of adrenal fatigue, and specifically a woman who's breastfeeding. Her little one's 4 months old, I believe, and she's feeling fatigued, she's feeling sleeplessness, she has all the symptoms that people would associate with so-called adrenal fatigue. And then the issue is, well, what do I do? The question was, what kind of supplements or adaptogens can I take? And so I want to get some misconceptions out of the way with adrenal fatigue. First of all, most people think, and by the way, adrenal fatigue is not a diagnosis, it's a functional disturbance. And we're not exactly clear. People define adrenal fatigue in many, many different ways, and it's almost always just defined by its symptoms, which are going to essentially be fatigue, lack of motivation, loss of libido, inability to focus, difficulty with sleep, waking up, fragmented sleep, these kinds of things, and just a general feeling of sort of a lowered energetic or lowered vitality. So obviously the trick with adrenal fatigue is that could be any number of things, right? So we just throw all these things under this umbrella of adrenal fatigue. And let me make some sort of observations about this idea of adrenal fatigue as it relates to people in the alternative health community. The adrenals rarely fatigue the way you've been told. It's not like the adrenals, the old model is that, there's sort of this tired horse and you keep whipping the horse and sooner or later the horse just fatigues and peters out and falls down and can't do anything. That's typically not what's going on with the adrenals. This idea that the adrenals just stop producing cortisol or stop producing the adrenal hormones or are no longer able to respond. Almost always adrenal fatigue is an issue of the brain, the hypothalamus and the pituitary, which are essentially the command and control center of the metabolism. So really when we talk about adrenal fatigue, or if we talk about thyroid dysfunction or gonadal dysfunction, ovarian or testicular issues, low testosterone, estrogen and progesterone issues, typically when they're related to stress or lifestyle effects, overtraining, undersleeping, poor nutrition, it's almost always related to the brain and the hypothalamus and pituitary's connection to the adrenals, to the thyroid, or to the gonads. We call that the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, hypothalamic pituitary thyroid, and hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. When we talk about adrenal fatigue, that's really what we're talking about. And for lack of a better term, you could think about irritation of the hypothalamus, which is the area of the brain that basically takes in all the sensory data and all the hormonal data that the body's producing. And when that gets overwhelmed by all these data, all this incoming information, because that's what hormones are and that's what these senses are when we have all this stuff going out in the outside world, is the hypothalamus starts to react. You can think of this almost like a thermostat. When it gets too hot in the room, the thermostat sort of turns on to cool things down. When the hypothalamus does that, it means it stops listening to some of the hormones and command system, and we get sort of this, what's known as receptor depression or receptor resistance. Have you ever heard hormone resistance? Well, this can happen in many areas of the body, including in the hypothalamus, where the receptors are downregulated. So without going into all of the science behind this, the trick is then what do you do then? Well, it's not really about giving yourself adaptogens like rhodiola or ashwagandha or all of these things. Those things can be helpful, but when you want to think of an adaptogen, which by the way, for those of you who haven't heard that term, adaptogen, it really is just the ability to take a high functioning state and balance it, or take a low functioning state and balance it. And so it's a really important thing that our body does. We have mechanisms that allow us to go from parasympathetic to more sympathetic, and also mechanisms that allow us to go from sympathetic or stimulated to more parasympathetic. In other words, the body's always trying to reach balance or homeostasis, And adaptogens do this. They'll take you from a low functioning state to a higher functioning state back to balance. They'll take you from a high functioning state to a lower functioning state back to balance. The best adaptogens are lifestyle adaptogens. So I don't know why everyone jumps on the bandwagon with adaptogens related to supplements. The best adaptogens are the following: exercise when it's not overdone, movement when it's done in the right way, enough but not too much exercise, enough to sort of make the body respond but not so much to stress the body out, is one of our best adaptogens. That's why when you're under stress, doing enough exercise and making sure you're moving is really, really useful. Meditation is another key adaptogen. It's a lifestyle adaptogen. That's why it's so powerful in its ability to balance everything. Another one is obviously sleep. And if you can't sleep, if you're like this particular woman who's breastfeeding and having fragmented sleep because the baby's waking up and things like that, then you can nap. Research has shown that a 10-minute nap can undo much of the negative effects that happen from not being able to sleep through the night. And then the other one that we don't typically think about is sex and physical affection, which is another brilliant lifestyle adaptogen. Cuddling, orgasm, sex, these kinds of things, again, balance our bodies and bring us into a homeostatic state. So these lifestyle adaptogens are really what you want to look for first. Obviously, good nutrition can be a lifestyle adaptogen. And so first and foremost, you need to look at these things. Am I moving appropriately? Am I eating appropriately? Am I getting enough connection with my fellow humans, physical affection, that kind of thing? And by the way, it doesn't have to be sex with a romantic partner. It could be connection with people you love, your family, just getting on the phone. These things are very balancing to us. Sleep, meditation. These things you need to do first and foremost, and then you can go into some of the more popular adaptogens. I'll tell you my two favorite really quickly: rhodiola and ashwagandha. Rhodiola, for those of you who have fatigue, sort of this state where you're just generally fatigued, lack of motivation, rhodiola is going to be the one you want to use. Between 200 and 400 milligrams per day is what the research shows, and it is pretty reliable in having an effect on fatigue and sort of getting you back to function, not because of what it does to the adrenal glands, but because of what it does in the hypothalamus and restoring the effects of the brain's ability to have more sensitive receptors. The other one is ashwagandha, and this one is, you can kind of think of, whereas rhodiola is for sort of just general fatigue, think of ashwagandha as being for the wired but tired type of people, the ones that are sort of over anxious, the ones that are having fragmented sleep, the ones that need to calm down but are also fatigued. Ashwagandha is more calming. Now that's a generalization. Sometimes that it can be different depending on the person, but those are ways to sort of think about that. Now, if you are pregnant and or nursing and you look up rhodiola and its safety in nursing or with pregnancy, you'll see, well, you probably shouldn't use. And this is par for the course for herbs because most of them have not been studied. They're probably absolutely safe. Just out of an abundance of caution, most doctors, even alternative ones, will say, probably shouldn't take it. There might be some issues there just because it's an herb. So if that's a concern for you, one of my favorite, sort of adaptogens in the natural supplement world is the supplement glutamine, which is funny because glutamine is one of these supplements where if you look at the research on it's horrible, but if you look at the clinical experience with it, the clinical experience is fantastic for fatigue, to balance out immune function. It's just one of these things that I have had fantastic success with. It just also happens to be one of these things that's not well studied or not well validated in the studies. But obviously, if something works clinically over and over and over again, I don't really care what the studies say. I just know it works. And so with ashwagandha, by the way, you're going to do maybe 1,000 milligrams to 1,500 milligrams per day. Rhodiola, 200 to 400 milligrams. And glutamine, between 5 to 20 grams. Remember, this is essentially an amino acid, and so 2 big tablespoons of glutamine powder is going to be wonderful for people in this. So I hope that helps you in terms of just a little bit about adrenal fatigue, answers this particular woman's question, and gives you guys an idea of some of the things we think about when we think about this term, quote, adrenal fatigue, which really isn't the best term to use. Hopefully you learned that. So hopefully that's helpful, guys, and I'll see you next time.